As Unitarian Universalist, skepticism is baked into us. It is part of our theological DNA. It's how we came to be. In 1438, the printing press was created, and after that, people for the first time could read the Bible for themselves, and they did. And some of the people who did that went through and they said, wait, there's nothing in here about the Trinity. And if you priests were wrong about that, maybe you've been wrong about some of the other things that you've talked about. Other people read the Bible and they said, yes, there are things in here about hell, but you, the church, have told me that this should be the number one fear in my life. And yet I am reading these things that talk about God's love and that say that I will never be separated from God's everlasting love. I don't think that that works with this picture of this cruel God that condemns people to hell. And thus, Unitarianism and Universalism became movements that then became denominations that then combined and brought us to where we are now. Skepticism for us is very literally a religious value, and it is a value that is very much needed in the world today, because skepticism pushes us to look deeper and farther. When something doesn't make sense, when we are skeptical of something that we are hearing, it can be what pushes us to go out and find better sources and find things that actually make sense. Skepticism is what pushes us to differentiate between what is true and what is false. And the stakes for that right now could not be any higher, both in terms of our actual literal life and death, physical health, because we are getting so many mixed messages and mixed messages that don't make any sense. How can someone say we're going to have a vaccine by November and also say that this whole coronavirus thing is a hoax and you shouldn't wear masks and come out by the thousands to this rally I'm having where we can all be packed together? It just doesn't make sense. And so our skepticism kicks in and says, I need to search for better sources. It is good to be skeptical at any time, but especially right now. But don't allow skepticism to simply make you cynical. Don't allow skepticism to shut you down. That is not to our benefit. That is to the benefit of those who are trying to foment all of these questions and make us just want to throw up our hands and say, well, who can even know? It is in our theological DNA to be skeptical. And it is also in our theological DNA to trust, to be mindful about making a choice who and what we trust, and what are the responsibilities that come along with that. Unitarian Universalist theologian of the 20th century, James Luther Adams, was aware of how important this issue was of what you are skeptical of and what you trust. See, he was over in Germany right as the Nazi regime was beginning to take power. In fact, at times his own life was in danger, and that affected him even when he came back to the United States, as of course it would. It affected how he saw the world and how he saw Unitarian theology. In an essay titled, "We Are Fated to Be Free," he wrote, "The fact that every person, whether they will it or not, must put trust in something is no basis for any particular faith. Rather, the necessity as well as the fact shows only that we humans must choose. We cannot escape making a choice, nor can we escape the responsibility for the choices we make any more than we can escape their consequences. We cannot hide behind someone else's authority or choice. Whenever we delegate a decision to someone else, or to the Bible, or to a church, we have made a decision. Skepticism and trust are a continuum, and we need both parts of them. We need to find ourselves in different places along that continuum, depending on where we are and what the circumstances are. But we have to choose what it is that we are going to trust. We can't simply be skeptical and say, oh, it's just impossible, and cede the authority for our choices to someone else. We are seeing the dangers right now, aren't we? Of people who have ceded their own decision-making ability to others, who have simply said, well, this person who I have decided to throw my lot in with, this leader says this, so whether it is reasonable or not, whether it goes against my personal values or not, I am putting those aside and I am going to trust him, period, no matter what. It simply is not possible to simply do away with trust, nor should it be. We need that. What sort of a life would that be if we were going through life feeling that we could trust no one? We can't make it on our own, none of us. And so we need to be able to find both the information and the institutions and the people whom we can trust. I trust this religion. I trust Unitarian Universalism. I don't always agree with all of my colleagues or other UUs, other adherents. We have different ideas about how we should achieve certain goals, but by and in large, the goals of our religion as laid out in those 7 principles, the goals are sound and have been proven over and over again. The values, the tenets of Unitarian Universalism provide a foundation that we can build from and that we can allow to guide our own lives. Again, always making our own choices. This is something that I can trust. When I am living in a year I never could have imagined, when I am living in circumstances that I would have thought completely unbelievable, I can go back to that faith. That faith, I will tell you though, is not easy. That faith will push you to do very hard things, but you are doing it in service of a grander vision, a vision of a better world, of creating beloved community. It is those tenets, that foundation that drove last week the First Unitarian Church of Louisville, when there were people out on the street, hundreds of peaceful protesters, and the police began moving in and all of a sudden called a curfew earlier than it was supposed to be and started arresting people. First Unitarian of Louisville welcomed everyone into their church and onto their property in sanctuary so that they could not be arrested. And during that evening, the police completely surrounded their church, and anyone who dared to step off the property was arrested. There were guns pointed at that church. But they continued welcoming people in and giving them sanctuary, giving them food and water, because they knew that this was the right thing to do. Yes. When I think of the things that I trust this religion. And I trust this church. I trust Live Oak. I trust Live Oak because of its past history. It has proven itself over and over again to being a beacon in this community and a congregation that also has the humility to want to grow and change and be better. And every time we get a new member into our congregation, my trust and my optimism only grows. We are committed to a really simple idea that again goes back throughout our Unitarian Universalist history, and it is this: we work to do good and to be good. And right now, I see so many members working on both of those things. We are working to identify things in ourselves that can be made more whole and more just. We are questioning white supremacy and our role in it. We are working to figure out the ways that we can dismantle it. And we work to make a difference in people's lives, whether it is by creating the most inclusive, safe space that we can for all people, especially those who have been marginalized, but also by going outside into the wider community and making it better for other people, whether it is by feeding them or by advocating, voting, and marching and doing things that will make our schools and our community better. I trust this church. And as James Luther Adams said, JLA, as we sometimes call him, there's a responsibility that comes with those choices of who we are going to trust, what we are going to trust. And one of the responsibilities for trusting Live Oak the way that I do is that I am all in. I am working to give this church all of my energy and all of my love and a significant part of my paycheck as well. And the reason why I do that is because I trust this church. I know that this church has been working and building and getting better year by year. And right this past spring, thanks to so many of the leaders in this church, we really were on the cusp of getting some of the growth that we have dedicated ourselves to, because it's not enough for us to create a space that is nice and safe and inclusive for us. We have to make it as welcoming as possible and to shine a light so that others who need us can find this place, even if right now it's only online. But we had finally set up, in a church, there's things called church works, which kind of encompasses this field of what are the programs you have set up, what are the committees and stuff like that, so that you can really grow, and so that when people come in, they really feel welcome, and you have a way to integrate them into the life of the community. And we had achieved that. And yes, then coronavirus came. But it's okay, because I trust this church, because we already are talking about things that we are doing differently now that will make us a stronger church when we are all able to get together again. I have been accused occasionally of being optimistic, but my optimism is warranted here, because I am hearing all of the passion and the energy and the gratitude that people are sharing right now. They are looking around in wonderment. I have heard so many people say, do you know what? I think that I am even closer to the members of Live Oak today than I was before this pandemic began, because we are making people a priority. We know that right now we are writing the story of Live Oak during the pandemic. And so along with caring for each other and continuing to do the things that we do, worship and religious education, faith development, social action, along with continuing to do all of those things to help us make sense of this moment in time that we're in, we are also working towards the future. Sometimes very literally, we are doing work at the church for when we are able to come back, so that when we get that go ahead, that it is safe for all of us to physically be together again. We are going to be like a racer who has his foot braced against that brick so that he or she or they can take off with all the power and the energy and the momentum behind them. I am skeptical of many things, but I will tell you, Live Oak is not one of them. Yes, we are going through an unprecedented time and we have unprecedented challenges, but I also know that we have the resources and the will to make this a time that is fruitful and that is going to pay off dividends in the future. And as skeptical as I am about the world right now, I am influenced by where I am. And I see so much goodness here. And that tells me that maybe the world is not quite as wrecked as I think it is. I trust in the vision of so many who came before us. And I know that if we pull from both sides of our theological heritage, this time I'm not talking Unitarian or Universalist, I am talking about skepticism and trust. If we pull from both of those, I have no reason to feel anything other than optimism.